In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the rear brakes on this Dodge Ram 2500. Let's get started. If your vehicle has these covers on the lug nuts, take them off with a pry bar. Be careful not to scratch the wheel. Once you pull this off, you can take all of your 24mm lug nuts off. With those off, remove the wheel. Now use a 13mm socket or wrench. You might not be able to fit the socket up here just because of the clearance issues between the leaf spring, and break these bolts free. These are the slider pin bolts. They go all the way through the caliper. So hopefully yours aren't stuck, because a lot of times if the boot gets seized up a little bit, it actually gets the pin stuck in there, or the bolt. I'm going to do the same to the lower one and remove them the rest of the way. There's one, set it aside, and if they are completely rusty and in really poor condition, definitely replace them, because this is what holds your caliper on. This is also what it slides on, so you want to make sure they are going to work properly for you. So take this one out as well. At this point, we should be ready to get the caliper off. However, yeah, just like I figured, it's going to need a pry bar. A lot of times they do get stuck like this. If you end up having to pry it, it will have to be from the top. The bottom of the caliper has a hook on it and will not come off like this. It won't slide. Once you pry it off, remove it and inspect it. If you see a lot of fluid here, that's a leak. You definitely need a new caliper. Ours is clean, and it is a little bit rusty, but still reusable. Now you also don't want to let it hang here by the brake hose, so I'm going to get a bungee cord and attach it right to the leaf spring until we're ready to move further with it so that it doesn't damage the brake hose. There we go. However you hang it, make sure once again it is not pulling pressure on the brake hose, and it's going to stay here safely. Let's remove the pads. Just slide them out like this. You may or may not need a pry bar for them, of course. There it is. Use a 21mm socket. Remove the two bolts that hold the caliper bracket onto the rear axle. These are fairly tight, so you might need a breaker bar or a long ratchet of some sort. There's one and two. Once you have them broken free, remove them the rest of the way. Remove your bolts, remove the caliper bracket, set it aside. Next, you're going to want to remove the rotor. Sometimes it gets stuck. If it's on the face of the hub, you can hit it with a hammer, or if it's the parking brake shoes, you're going to want to work it back and forth and loosen them up. This one is not that stuck. It is moving, so I'll just have to work it sideways, up and down, and slide it off. There it is. Before I continue, I'm going to use a wire brush and just get all of the debris on this loosened up a little bit. It's not very rusty, but it was quite oily, and there's a lot of gunky oil buildup on the surface of this hub, so I just want to get rid of that so I can have a nice clean surface for my rotor to mount on. If yours was extremely rusty, you're going to want to sand it down with a little sanding disc, but of course don't remove too much material. Hopefully a wire brush is all you're going to need. Once you're done, rinse it with brake parts cleaner. Dry it off with compressed air if you have access to it. I'm going to mount the rotor on backwards so that I can have an easier time cleaning it. Clean the inside here where the parking brake shoes go with a clean rag and some brake parts cleaner. As you can see, there's plenty of oils on it from the factory so that it doesn't rust while it's sitting on the shelf. Also clean the main braking surface on the outside here. Degrease it. You don't want any of these oils on your shoes or your pads. Take it off, flip it over, install it the right way. This is not going to be the final installation, but I do want to get it clean. Wipe it off. I'm going to coat the surface of the hub in anti-seize. I recommend you do this after you clean it, otherwise it's bone dry and it will continue rusting. Try to avoid getting it on the lug studs though. If you do, no big deal, just wipe them off. Wipe these off a little bit, and then we should be all set to finish installing our rotor. Install the rotor. Perfect. We have our caliper bracket on the workbench here ready to get cleaned up so we can reinstall it. Keep in mind before you take the anti-rattle clips or the springs apart that they are different, and in your brake kit you will actually get two different styles. So the style that we need is this one that has the clip on top with 3 equal length tabs that look the same. The clip on the bottom here, actually this would be the top, it's upside down right now, has 2 tabs with a shorter one in the middle. So you're going to want to match them up with what you already have. Having said that, remove these off of the caliper. If yours is in horrible condition, you're going to need to sand this down with a little sanding disc. Mine is actually not too bad. This is just some surface rust here. So all I'm going to do is spray a little bit of brake parts cleaner on it to keep the dust down and wire brush it. The wire brush should remove all of the surface rust, and the brake parts cleaner should rinse it down. What you want to do if you have a lot of buildup here is get it nice and flat. Otherwise you won't be able to seat that clip all the way down. That will be an issue since it'll end up basically clamping the brake pads in between the bottom and the top if it's sitting too far up. So you want to make sure that this is as clean as you can get it. It doesn't have to be shiny new, but free of any rust buildup. Rinse it down. Take a very thin layer of either brake grease or brake rated silicone paste, whatever you're using, and apply it to this area. This should prevent rust from building up for a while. Apply it to the inside too, basically everywhere where you cleaned and where the clip will go. Make sure you get the correct one. Put it on the right way with the tabs facing outward. Clip it on all the way down. You shouldn't have to really hammer it on tight, but you want to make sure it's not going to just fall off. If you sanded this down and you sanded too much, this will not clip on. It's just going to keep falling off. I recommend replacing the bracket at that point. Having said that, do the same to the other side. Sometimes they're pretty stuck and you need to pry them off. If you put too much grease on here, keep in mind that it'll squish out and it could get on the rotor or the pads, neither of which is a good thing. So that's why you want to make sure you don't put too much, but enough to create a barrier from water getting on here. Take the clip and line it up. Make sure it's on all the way. There we go. This bracket is ready to be put back on the vehicle. Next on the cleaning list is going to be the sliders on the caliper. So this one, doesn't really matter which side it comes out through, whether it's through the top or through the bottom, you're going to have to slide it out. This one's a little bit stuck here, but it is moving, so that's good. I'm going to take a little pocket screwdriver and pry out this boot, just like that. This should allow me to continue pushing the pin up and through. There we go. Take this out. As you can see, it does require some cleaning. It's a little bit corroded, but it's not seized, so that's good. This boot does come out. However, there's nothing wrong with it. Once if you inspect yours and you see that it's torn or it's swollen, damaged in any way, you're going to have to replace it. It's one piece that goes through. I'm going to just leave mine in place since, like I said, there's nothing wrong with it. However, I will run this rag through it to just clean up any debris that's in there. What I'm going to do is twist this, stick it through, and then kind of just go up and down with it. That should clean it out. There we go. Do the same on this side. Unfortunately, doing this, you're kind of stuck very close to the vehicle here just because the caliper is obviously still attached, so it might be a little tricky, but once you get this cleaned off, you're going to want to do the same to this pin. So wipe it off, assuming you still have plenty of grease on it. I'm actually going to bring this over to my wire wheel so I can get rid of all this rust here. This is where the boot seals up, and if you have rust, it will not seal up properly. So once I clean this off, get back here, lubricate it, and reinstall it. Here's what the pin looks like after I cleaned it up. I know it's not perfect, but it is way better and totally reusable. Having said that, I'm not going to put much grease on this because it's such a tight fit, it will just get wiped off as I put it in. Instead, I'm going to put grease in the boot. The little folds here are going to hold the grease, more like a reserve of grease, as this operates. So add some here. Any excess will just come out the other side, so if you put too much, I mean, try not to because that's just a waste of grease, but if you end up putting too much, it's not going to be an issue since, like I said, it will come out the other side. Do this on both, and whatever I have left on my brush, I'm going to apply to the pin itself. Like I said, just a thin layer. In the end, what this is going to do is just help it slide in a little bit easier. Not much is actually going to stay on the pin. So, slide it down. Just like that. All the excess grease came out the other side. Make sure the boot is seated here. This should slide back and forth real easily, which it is. So that's perfect. Clean up any excess grease, and of course do the same on the other side. Slide the caliper bracket on, line it up with the 2 bolt holes, and if you have your bolts ready, you should be able to start them in. Once you start them in, bottom them out. The torque for these is 145 foot-pounds. All right, both of those are torqued. These pads will have a wear indicator that's supposed to go on the inside with the wear indicator on the bottom so that the piston can push the wear indicator pad and the wear indicator can be pushed up into the rotor. Make sure it slides easily into the retainers here, and if it doesn't, if it has a hard time, that means you didn't clean it up enough and it's bound up. The outer pad does not get a wear indicator. Both of my pads slide easily, so I'm good to go. Now I'm going to compress the pistons on my caliper. Go very slow, push them back, and you want to make sure that you can push them back slowly, but with minimal amount of force. If it takes a lot of force, that means the pistons are seized in there. Take the tool out. Grab your caliper, slide it over the pads and the bracket. Just like so. There we go. That fell right into place. And now I have my 2 bolts ready. I'm gonna try and find their threads here. There we go. This one lined up, started on by hand. Do the same on the bottom. All right, with them both started, grab that 13mm wrench or socket, tighten them up. The torque for these is only 22 foot-pounds. It's not a lot, so make sure you don't over-tighten them before torquing them. That's one. And 2. Let's torque them down. Once again, 22 foot-pounds. That's 1. And 2. Let's get the wheel back on. Put on all 8 of your lug nuts, bottom them out in a cross pattern, and also in a cross pattern, we're going to torque these to 140 foot-pounds. Once again, 140 foot-pounds in a cross pattern. If you want to double check them, go ahead. And now, if your truck still had this lug nut cover, make sure you put it back on. Snap it in place, pump up that brake pedal, and take it for a road test.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.